to, but for the time being, for my lifetime, I stayed in Egypt because the sovereign God moved me from the land of Canaan to Egypt for me to go through a certain time of training for sanctification, for his plan of saving the Israelites while there were famines and droughts. And to make me, well, he didn't say that, but as we look back, we can say, as God was shaping Joseph to become a foreshadow of the Messiah to come. And even to become a foreshadow of Messiah is not easy. And he went through ups and downs of life, and in the midst of that, he learned to communicate with God, to become humble, to be wise, to be forgiving, to have a big heart, to be able to contain many people. Eventually to become a channel of salvation in a physical sense for his own people. And he died as a human being, 110 years of age. And like I said, they were eventually going to go back to Canaan, but because for the time being they were staying there, and they started to increase in number, right? Initially, Jacob's 12 sons actually had, altogether his family had 70 people overall, right? But then after that, it became so numerous, and they were, as a whole, they were called Hebrews. Yeah, very interesting. It means they have crossed the river. Hebrew means they have crossed the river. On their way to Egypt, maybe they have crossed the river, but very interestingly, spiritually, they have crossed the river of no return, right? Having entered into the covenant relationship with God, they have crossed the river of no return, meaning they were God's people now. They were in God's hands. They're not wandering anymore, and they could not. They could leave God, but God would relentlessly chase after them out of His love, because that's good for them. Ultimately, if you run away from God, it's for your loss, and eventually you will experience the grief of not knowing the Creator, not knowing the purpose for your life, not having a sense of direction, and it's a very scary place to be. I wonder why people call it freedom, why people call it living according to my own will. I used to be in the world, following the pattern of thinking of the world, and it totally made sense to me. Like, don't bother me. Like, don't let a religion control me or determine my course of life. And because I misunderstood God as being created by an institution, and the institution actually controlling me. But that is not the case. Of course, that factor is there, but that's something else. But when you come to understand that there is a Creator, that He loves you dearly, that you're called to enter into that relationship with God, then all the other factors, yes, they oftentimes become a hindrance. But nevertheless, if you really meet God, you don't want to go back to your old life, because that is an orphan's life. That is a life as a wanderer. You are traveling and you have no map, no GPS whatsoever, and you have nobody who is guiding you. You don't even know what's ahead, and you don't know how to overcome. And in the end, you don't even know if you're going to reach the destination that you're supposed to be at. perhaps you don't even realize that there's a destination. I'm glad that I met God because I have a sense of purpose for my life. I have a sense of direction. I am in peace because I'm in God's hands. Like, I sometimes misunderstand and try to go back to my old ways of thinking, like, okay, I gotta make a decision. But yes, we've got to make a decision, but there's always a guiding hand. There's always a coach. There's always a mentor, especially called the Holy Spirit. And we just need to remember to turn to Him for guidance and advice and to know where we are. All we need to do, it's like little children following parents. They don't have to know and navigate all the way in order to get to the destination. All they need to do is stick to their parents, right? And then parents will take them to the right destination, and they're gonna bring them back home safely. And so what we need to do is to really stick to God and follow His guidance. So then the Israelites were still staying in Egypt after Joseph has passed. He had been a great figure in Egypt, being a prime minister of influence. However, the next pharaoh was someone who did not know Joseph at all. And he started oppressing the Hebrews. The reason is because they were so numerous. When someone that is from outside, someone who is foreign, becomes a large group, it's always a threat to the existing group, right? And so the Hebrew became, because they were increasing number rapidly, they became a threat to the Egyptian government and the kingdom of Egypt. And therefore, they said, okay, because they're becoming too numerous, maybe we're giving them such a good time. Treat them harshly, enslave them, just give them a lot of work, construction and whatsoever, so that they won't have a chance to rest and they won't be able to increase in number anymore because they're under so much work and pressure, and there's no rest, that they'll be physically not well and mentally not well. Like, let them not be able to think about rebelling, having a riot against us, and let them decrease in number. In fact, kill off all the boys. So that was going on when Moses, as a Hebrew boy, was born. His father and mother were both from the tribe of Levites. The Levites were given the priesthood by God. God designated one of the tribes as priests, and Moses was born as a priest's parent's child, and of course he was subject to the massacre, the sort of a genocide, and so then his mother, probably being a very spiritual woman, meaning knowing God, knowing the will of God, when she sees something, she sees from a spiritual perspective. And when she saw her little boy, there was something very different about him. And she couldn't throw him out, she couldn't let him be killed. And she wanted to know, okay, there must be something about this baby, there must be God's will. And what am I supposed to do? She did what she could and left the rest in God's hands. So what she came up with as a brilliant plan, probably inspired by God, she used the reeds to make a basket and plastered it with tar so that it would be waterproof, and put the baby in the basket, covered it, and let it go on the Nile River. Nile River is full of crocodiles and dangerous, right? You don't go there and dip your hands, right, or feet. There are strange fish. They can harm you, all kinds of insects. But in the midst of that, the baby goes along the Nile River without being flipped over or, being devoured by crocodile. But by chance, coincidentally, it arrives where Pharaoh's daughter, the next king's mom, was bathing. And when she saw that, instead of ignoring or, oh, get it out of the way, no, she said, get that basket and give it to me. And she opened it. As she opened, the baby started crying. And what a perfect timing, right? While it was floated to where she was, the baby remained quiet, but now all of a sudden he started crying, and it actually brought compassion out of her. And so then she said, oh, it must be a Hebrew boy. I'm gonna adopt him. Instead of saying, oh, kill him off, it's a king's law. No, she said, I'm gonna adopt him. And coincidentally, a little Hebrew girl appears, a girl who is safe. She doesn't have to be killed, right? She appears and she says, oh, do you want me to go get a nanny, Hebrew nanny for the Hebrew boy? And without asking any other questions or wondering why she was there and why she was asking that question, the princess goes, oh yeah, please get a nanny. And here comes the baby's biological mother, and she raised him to the point he was weaned off from breastfeeding, and then he was turned over to the palace to live. And while I don't know how long the biological mom was in contact with the boy, but somehow Moses learned, according to the scriptures, he learned that he is Hebrew, that although he was raised in the palace as an Egyptian with the language and culture and with royal practices, and actually the history indicates that Moses could have been a pharaoh. His older brother, the prince's real biological son, actually was to become the next pharaoh. And people are just guessing that his name might have been Ramses, right? Ramses II. And he was actually the one who went out expeditions a lot and expanded the country to the largest territory. And he actually wanted to hand over the next kingship to his brother Moses. They must have had a really good relationship because of their mother. And somehow, God coordinated everything that he would grow in safety. However, deep down in his heart, he knew that he was a Hebrew. And to the point that when he saw that his own people being oppressed, he couldn't hold it anymore. He went out and struck down the Egyptian who was oppressing the Hebrew. And so, we don't know what caused it, but he happened to kill the Egyptian, and the word spread, and now Pharaoh tried to kill him. So he starts to run, and where he arrived was coincidentally Midianites' land, right? But where the Midianites were, he happened to just run and rest at a well. And at that well, actually, the 7 daughters of Jethro, the Midianite priest, were out there, and they were trying to feed their animals. Now, there were some evil shepherds who came. Shepherds are not always good. There are bandits and evil shepherds too, right? And they actually came and harassed those 7 girls. While that was going on, coincidentally, that was happening and unfolding. That was happening right before Moses' eyes. And Moses, being this guy with, at that time, self-righteousness, he has this instinct to rescue people. So he goes out and rescues these 7 daughters from the hands of the shepherds. And the daughters actually go back and report to their father because, they happen to just come back home very early, very unusual. And father goes like, why are you so early, And they started talking about what happened, how can they not talk about it, right? And then they talked about the fact that, this Egyptian called Moses, although he was Hebrew, he had all the look, the look of an Egyptian. You know, probably the hairstyle, the dress. You know, he was from a royal palace. He probably stood out. And they said, oh, you know, like this man from Egypt actually rescued us. And when the father Jethro, although he was a priest to other gods, you know, he must have been some kind of a spiritual man. When he saw Moses, he liked him. We don't know what made him like him, but perhaps something about his, maybe he saw something in him. Because Moses stood out even as a baby. You know, when his parents saw him, they saw that there was something special about the boy. Anyway, so the shepherd actually gives Zipporah his first daughter to Moses to get married, and so he gets married, he has children, he's tending sheep, and there's nothing to worry about. After so many years have passed, decades have passed, it's like now speaking the fluent language of Midianites probably. I don't know what language they speak, and he became a Midianite. Now, he goes to a common place where he hangs out with his sheep, called Mount Horeb. And there was a bush, and it's a small bush. You know, it's not even tall, it's not gigantic, but it was burning. And there was a voice calling Moses. And so he is like, okay, what is going on? And he says, oh, here I am, Lord. And then he goes, take off your sandals because this is a holy ground. And I am the God of Abraham, Jacob, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I'm telling you, I'm commanding you to go back and rescue my people because they are under the oppression and their cries are heard. I need to respond. I'm concerned about my people. And, you know, certainly he becomes really surprised. He knows exactly who that is, you know, that was speaking to him. So that's where he is. Okay, so chapter 4, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? They're going to treat me like a lunatic. They're not going to believe what I say. And the Lord said to him, he used to be a royal prince, and people used to take him seriously just because of his positional power. Now he's nobody. And he lost touch with everyone. Egyptians, his own biological family, if they were in touch at all. And he forgot about his past. He probably doesn't speak the Egyptian language fluently anymore after 40 years of not speaking. Can you imagine? Unless the Midianites speak the same language. But anyway, for 40 years he was in the wilderness taking care of the sheep. Now his identity is not a royal prince, not even a Hebrew boy. He is a Midianite shepherd with children, his own children and wife, and he is just, I'm a shepherd. That's his identity now. And now God is calling, okay, I'm going to send you as an ambassador and leader, foreshadow of the Messiah to come. You're going to rescue the millions of people. And he's like, they're not gonna even take me seriously. Like, I forgot about everything. I'm so dumb right now, and I feel so confused. Like, what are you doing? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff? He replied, the Lord said, throw it on the ground. And so a staff is what a shepherd carries with him all the time, right? It's for tending sheep. And if any of the sheep goes astray, then you have to flip it over or bring them back so that they will not be lost, right? And a staff is not a weapon. A staff is not a scepter with authority. It has no power. And God goes, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake. And he ran from it. See how scary it is? Like, whoa! And he just runs away. And the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. You don't take a snake by the tail. You're gonna get bit. You don't catch him. No, you don't touch a snake. If you can, you need to crush the head. right? But he goes, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake. Moses felt something in the voice of the Lord that was trustworthy. He reached out and took hold of the snake, and he turned back to a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Why is he calling it? It's simply the I am. I am his name. And why is it describing himself in such a long way? You know, naming like 3 people in a row. He's such a humble God. He loves us so dearly. I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, there could be other interpretations, but at least one of the interpretations could be that God loves us. It's like we loving an ant, a bug, you know, like, or a bacteria. You know, I love this bacteria so much. I'll become one of them. You know, God loved the fact that he entered into a covenant relationship with Abraham. Abraham was also like a foreshadowing Messiah, in that he symbolically represented the second Adam. The first Adam failed miserably. It doesn't matter if it started with Eve. Adam is the one who received the word, the command first, and he was right there with her. Should have stopped her. He didn't say anything, but he was only a culprit of crime, and he enabled her, right? And therefore, they both fell. And the first Adam miserably fell by disobedience, and therefore broke the covenant relationship with God. What is a covenant? A covenant is a serious promise between 2 or more parties. A covenant is long lasting. It's at least for a lifetime. And it's very serious. There are duties for a party. So covenant duties. So these are the things that you're supposed to be doing. These are things that I'm supposed to be doing. And we are entering into this promise, agreement for mutual benefits. And if any one of us break it, then what is the cost? It's not a fine. It's not imprisonment. No, it's death. And oftentimes it lasted longer than one generation. It was a generation after, especially tribal agreements. Usually the covenants, unless it's one girl and one boy, you know, getting married, you know, that's also a covenant, right? But oftentimes it was done by 2 or more tribes. Tribe A needs food from tribe B. Tribe B needs tribe A's military support, and they enter into a covenant. The covenant representatives, like one person from each tribe, might be the chief. You know, come together in the field, and behind them are their own tribes, and so it's one tribe versus the other tribe, and they bring out an animal. This is one of the ways to enter into a covenant. Cut it in half, and there's tons of blood, and you walk in the blood. And that was done actually by Abraham. When God said, take out the animal, and Abraham didn't need any detailed instructions or further instructions. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do. Knowing that God wanted to enter into a covenant relationship with him, he brought the animals and cut them in half. And God came in the form of a fire, and he went in between the animals. He entered into a covenant with Abraham. And why would this awesome holy God want to enter into a covenant relationship with a mere human being? We don't know, but we know that, yeah, he's unfathomable. He's so great, but he loves his creation and he loves his people. And so, although Abraham was imperfect in himself, like he went through the journey, he stumbled several times severely. However, he got up and continued the journey, and in the end, he saw how faithful God was, and that his promise that was awaiting came true. At least was like a drop of rain in anticipation of drop of rain. What God promised was it was gonna pour, but there was a sign of just little drops of water. When Abraham saw that, based on all he saw about God, what God has done time after time for at least 25 years, right? And even after that, he saw, you know what? For decades, he's been really faithful, and he's been amazing. I'm gonna trust him. When I see these drops of rain, I know that, soon after, even if I'm not here, it's gonna pour. I trust that. So he died in that faith. Now, so he's called the father of faith. Father of faith was not perfect, but each time he grew in his faith, in his trust in the Lord. And each step of the way, he surrendered more to God. And then he became more and more like God. So there was transformation. Now, so God was not ashamed to call himself God of Abraham. And then the covenant was for like the everlasting covenant. So it was passed down to Isaac. He renewed his covenant with Isaac. He renewed his covenant with Jacob. Yeah, Jacob's story, if you go back to Genesis, it's quite interesting because Jacob was born as a twin. Isaac had two sons, Esau and Isaac. They came out in the same womb at almost at the same time. Esau happened to come out of the womb 1 minute before, right? And Jacob probably from the beginning had this issue. I am born just 1 minute after him. Like, mom could have, positioned herself differently. Like, I don't know, if she exercised a little bit, maybe I was to come out first and I was to be called the first son. It was such a big deal because the first son was supposed to receive the family honor and 2/3 of the inheritance and twice as much of the inheritance other people might receive. And the first son was just he was the one who carried the family heritage, and so he was like the chief. He would make all the important decisions and all that. So then Jacob, just by 1 minute, like he took that birthright, and I don't have that birthright. Although it was prophesied, while they were in the mother's womb, it had been prophesied that Jacob, the younger, would serve, the older would serve the younger, and the younger would become prominent. So he could have just waited. Just if he waited in faith, because his mother, who loved him dearly, probably remembered and passed the word to Jacob. You know, this was prophesied, about you. So just pray and try to, learn to be a leader. But instead, the mother, I think mother was a big factor. She actually coached him, go ahead and do this to save your brother. I'm going to help you. And so by her, and she had her own family issues, but anyway, so then, Jacob being a mama's boy, he listened to his mom and his beautiful mom. Abraham's wife, Isaac's wife, Jacob's two wives were all, Jacob's one wife was beautiful. And he listened carefully to mom and actually stole the birthright from his older brother, who later found out, who despised his birthright because right now it doesn't mean anything. It's not even worth a bowl of soup. So I'm gonna just exchange for it. So he despised it, and that's why it was taken away from him. So both parties had mistakes, faults. But then Jacob sure waited in faith, but he failed that test. So then the way he was, God couldn't use him to be a blessing. So he had to go through this transformative process, which was quite painful for him. He was deceived so many times. Later on, he confesses, before Pharaoh, I lived a hard life. Life was really hard for me. But now I finally got to see my sons. Please be nice to them for the sake of me. Now, God is not afraid to call himself God of Jacob. Jacob was a deceiver, the heel grabber, heel grabber. But God says, although my kids are rude and nasty and not trusting, and there's nothing that they have done to earn the merit, but I love them. So I'm going to call myself God of Abraham, God of Jacob, God of Isaac. And so this signifies, this says a lot about who God is. Yeah. And starting from Abraham, who was a random person. But God saw a potential in him, but there was nothing holy about him. But God chose him, and God delights in calling himself God of Abraham. Now, tell him, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses, after, seeing his staff becoming a snake and, becoming a staff again, he's probably surprised, and he is amazed, and he still is doubtful. So that's the reason why the Lord says, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand into the cloak, and he took it out. Ooh, the skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. And he's like, oh, okay, now put it back into your cloak. So he did, and then he took it out, and then, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they don't believe you, or they don't pay attention to the first sign, they may believe the second. But if you do not believe these two signs, or listen to you, take some water from the Nile. Oh, Nile River is where he was floating when he was an infant. Pour on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. It's like, he's so afraid of God, but he's like, his sense of inadequacy is so great that he has to still negotiate with God. Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. Like, even as a child, like, I was like, oh, I was not a good speaker. Like, I stuttered, people don't listen to me, they don't pay attention to me. I am not persuasive. I'm slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Don't you realize that I am the creator? I gave you that mouth. I gave you that brain. Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? So I think at this point, it would be wonderful if Moses said, yes, I'm so dull with my mouth, but can you please make me eloquent? Can you please make me persuasive, that people will listen to me? Then he would have changed. But he missed a chance by just coming up with all the logical excuses, right? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. See, the Lord's frustrated. You don't know what I can do. Do you not know why I'm sending you? Okay, I understand. I understand how you feel. So you know what? I'm gonna be really considerate and just go with your way. I know he can speak well. He already is on his way to meet you, and he'll be glad to see you. Like right now, as I speak to you, like he's on his way. I told him so. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you to speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you. I understand that. Because I'm not an eloquent speaker, and really shy in my personality. Like I changed a great deal and still I'm not an eloquent speaker, right? And I've seen even people who struggle even more than I do, and I understand what it is like. So back in college years, whenever there was a class presentation, like there was at least one presentation for each class, almost each class, and that was like a dreadful moment. Preparing was totally fine. I could do the research, I could put them into like logical order, I could use like visuals and all that, but as I stood, I'll be like, I was gonna pass out, like my hands and feet were like, my hands were my whole body was trembling, my hands and feet were sweaty, and my breath was short, and my voice was as small as a little mouse. That's what people call me, a rabbit. You can't quite hear a rabbit, do you? The professor would always go like, can you speak a little louder? Give her a microphone. So it was like that. And so I understand when any one of you say, I'm not an eloquent speaker, like don't make me speak, like, okay, I'm the one who can come up with all the ideas. My default is like that way. I can come up with all the ideas, and then from the group, if somebody has to present or somebody has to say something in representation, then someone else can go. Like you can utilize my ideas, but be my mouthpiece. So if you feel that way, interestingly, God can use you where you're weak. And God, of course, gave us the gifts and talents, and He's going to utilize our strengths. But I think He has He feels that it's more fun to utilize our weaknesses in order to, because that makes us understand that it was not me, it was not human ability, but it was God who made it possible. So I think God is very good at making us do the things that we hate to do, that we feel like we're not capable of doing. So that's what He's doing to Moses, and he's just so, like, he feels so inadequate. He's wrestling with God. And then he goes, okay, fine. I'll give you Aaron. Now, are you going to go? He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if you were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it. He gives you tools, right? Although God can do anything and everything, he oftentimes equips us with something. He understands that we're mere human beings who really need to see something visible. Then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, let me return to my own people in Egypt to see if any of them are still alive. It doesn't say, now Moses, of course he's like 80 years of age, but he's wise now. It's not as impulsive, like, this is what happened to me. I went to Mount Horeb and God spoke to me among the bushes. No, he didn't say that. No, he says, let me return to my home country. I want to see like who's alive. I miss my family. Jethro said, go, and I wish you well. Now the Lord has said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead. Yeah. So Moses, he had a mission, and that's why he was going back, but also probably he missed his family too. And he probably wondered about who is out there still wanting to kill me. But Lord said to Moses, he says, go back to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead. This is an interesting parallelism. When Jesus was born, there was another order to kill off all the Jewish boys, the Hebrew boys, and Jesus was also subject to death. All these things happened because of Jesus. Jesus was to be the next king, and the stars actually appeared. A star appeared to signify that there is a majestic royal king that was born. And Herod was deeply troubled because he didn't want his kingship to be taken over. So misunderstanding that his kingship was an earthly kingship, he commanded, he passed it into saying, kill off all the Hebrew boys. And at that time, an angel of the Lord appears to Joseph, the surrogate father, I would say, right? Mary's husband, in a dream, and said, take your family, go to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you to come out. And so they did, and King Herod died, right? Then God said, now back to the promised land, back to Judea. Now God says to Moses, go back. Those people who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand. Then Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Wow. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn son. Very interesting, right? What does that mean? It means he's going to have another son at least, right? He might have a second son, right? Israel is my firstborn son. The second son, symbolically, is the Gentiles, the non-Jews, non-Hebrews, who were to be adopted into his family, like you and me. And I told you, let my son go. Let my son go. Let my people go, so he may worship, so that they may worship me. But you refuse to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. Yeah, this is kind of random, right? It sounds random. Why? But Zipporah took a flintlock. She knew exactly why he was about to be killed and what she needed to do in order to save him, right? Cut off her son's foreskin and touch Moses' feet with it. Surely you are the bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So what does that mean? Moses was born as a Hebrew boy, and because of the covenant, the covenant between Abraham and God, God told Abraham, okay, this is what you're supposed to be doing. One of the duties, whenever a boy is born, on eighth day, you need to circumcise him. Any boy, like it could be your slave's boy or any boy, circumcised. And probably Moses was circumcised because he was a Hebrew boy. But his children, because he got married to Zipporah, a Midianite, and his children probably, because Moses probably forgot about who he was, he forgot completely about his identity. The sons were not circumcised. So then Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, because at some point Moses actually told Zipporah about his past, probably. You know what? I'm not an Egyptian. I'm a Hebrew. And Hebrew means someone who has crossed over a river. And you know what? My people are different than the Egyptians in such a way that we're God's people. And he entered it, then all the memory probably came back and started talking about, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. At least by the time God spoke to Moses, I am God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he was reminded, right? And Zipporah heard through Moses what kind of God he was, what kind of covenant they had, what the responsibility was. And so immediately she's like, oh, anybody who is not circumcised will be cut off from the Hebrews, from the people of God. Oh, she's like, wow, it's a serious business, isn't it? She probably heard that, and then on their way, the angel of the Lord somehow appeared in a visible manner that even Zipporah was able to see. Then she knows exactly what to do. She circumcises his son, and then so the Lord led him along. At that time, she said, bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. The Lord said to Aaron, Moses' older brother, right? Go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he met Moses at the mountain of God and kissed him. Decades and decades have passed, and when you're a family, you recognize each other, right? Then Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say, and also about all the signs he had commanded him to perform. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. Yeah, he also performed the signs before the people, just like he was told, right? And they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. If Moses was making up a story, it would have some holes in the story, right? But what he's saying is so it is evident that he met the Lord. The prayers that the Lord told Moses that he heard was exactly how people were praying. So how can you not acknowledge that it's the Lord? So they bowed down and worshipped. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the next section after talking about chapter 2. I'm going to start with chapter 1, the end to the two paragraphs that we didn't cover last time, and then move on to chapter 2. So it's on page 9. So we talked about what coaching is and what coaching is not, right? So coach and client, they have mutual responsibilities. What are their responsibilities, right? So both of them, coach and client, need to be enthusiastic and optimistic, even if the client is not in a good place. Keep your hopes high. Be enthusiastic. If there's no motivation, the hardest thing is not the client with massive problems, but rather who is unmotivated, right? Someone who is motivated, you can take him somewhere, you can take her somewhere. However, if that person is not motivated, even if it's quite achievable, reasonable goal, that's not going to work too well. So the enthusiastic, optimistic sensitivity, sensitivity to each other, not just coach to client, but the client needs to be reasonable and the client needs to be considerate, right? And try to understand, because there's an individual difference and a cultural difference and all that. When I say cultural, we're not just talking about ethnic background, but rather because each family has its own culture, right? We all come from different backgrounds, different assumptions. Then try to understand each other, be sensitive, and unselfishness. Like it's not like client comes and then it's like, I'm gonna take all I can. No, it's a mutual growth. And if you become considerate for other people, then the other person, then overall you're gonna get more out of it. And respect, of course, the basic respect as human beings. If you treat the other person with disrespect or take the other person lightly, then the relationship is not going to be solid. A commitment of time and energy, there has to be some kind of regularity. It doesn't have to be like 2 times a week. It doesn't have to be like every week. But then there has to be some kind of regularity, some kind of predictability. And then you can't just show up and, I used up all my energy somewhere else, and this, I have no energy and therefore I'm not motivated, right? You can't do that. Being open to new ideas and feedback. This could be harder for those people who have a lot of experience and those people who have been relatively successful, I know how to do it, new ideas, and then feedback, it depends on where you are. If you are in a hard place, it might be even more difficult for you to process the feedback because you're already not doing well, and your self-esteem is low. Other people have criticized you enough, or maybe you grew up in that home, and then the feedback seems to be negative. Then you're like, you know what? I need something positive. So then that's why sensitivity is needed, right? However, if you are not open to feedback, for whatever reason it is, you have a very little room to grow, because how we can grow is when we are with other people. The highest standards of professional conduct, including full confidentiality of discussions, and we're going to talk more about confidentiality later. It can be full confidentiality. It could be somewhat partial confidentiality. You can ask for permission. You can come to an agreement. Anything that you say, even a single word, that's all confidential. Versus, can I utilize this particular example in my presentation somewhere? You get a permission, or this will not be the case, but Another extreme might be anything that we talk about. Do you agree that I can talk about somewhere else? So depending on where your client is, provide confidentiality and that level of confidentiality that the other person needs. This is part of trust as well. I've got a friend who dealt a lot with confidential discussions, and she was just talking too much about other people, including those people that I could recognize in our conversations, and I don't know what she talked about me, but I just didn't feel like sharing too much anymore. The trust wasn't there. She talked too much about her clients, and it's just not a good practice. Even if the other person who is listening has no chance of recognizing who the person is that you're talking about, it lowers that trust level. The other person is like, oh, okay, so you freely talk about anything that you hear. I don't feel safe because you're going to do the same thing to me, right? Reschedule any meeting time that can't be met. Periodically assess and celebrate progress. So you don't have to achieve like 100% of the goals, but what kind of progress that you made. Anyone would have made some kind of progress. I mean, unless you never worked on it, right? And so periodically assess and celebrate progress. Periodically evaluate the coaching relationship. So do you think this is going well? Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you want to continue? Client role and responsibilities. Establish a vision plan with help of the mentor. Help of the coach, I would say. So if you have a vision plan, that would be really helpful. And ownership to the relationship. Discussing and prioritizing professional needs and goals. So what is more important? You might have multiple goals, at least 3 goals, right? Which one is your priority? And then which ones are lesser? And you may ask for help, and to respect the coach's time commitment. So there was one, this was not a client, but I would say, well, it doesn't matter, right? This particular person, he went to receive the coaching, I would say, and he was just overtime every time. He had so much to talk about. He was kind of verbose, and his coach actually ended up saying, I need to get payment by the hours, otherwise you won't stop talking. So if that continues, eventually what's going to happen is, I can't take this anymore. You said that every time we meet, it's going to be 1 hour, or it depends, right? If you said 2 hours, 2 hours, but you're going over hour every time, and this is not going to work well, and you're not making progress. You're just being verbose, so that's not really helpful, right? Is willing to share fears and concerns with the coach. So the coach is not a counselor. Coach is not a therapist, so he's not going to focus on working on your emotions like a psychologist or marriage and family therapist or other type of counselors are. But nevertheless, when you share your fears and concerns, the coach can kind of, because your emotions can become a roadblock, it can work against your achievement goal, and then it needs to be worked on, right? The coach can, if it's a deep issue, going back to your childhood, maybe the coach can refer you to a counselor. However, if it's just temporary fears and worries, because there's so much change, or there's something that you need to sacrifice in order to make that change, and the coach will work with you. And actively pursues opportunities to network. just there are goals to be achieved solely by working by yourself, but there are goals that can be achieved better if you have a network. Strive to be a receptive and active listener. Not only the coach needs to be actively listening, but also the client. So that's what the relationship entails. Next is chapter 2. I'm going to talk about motivational theories. There's a reason we talk about motivational theories. I think I used the word motivation a few times before. If a person is not motivated, that's the hardest kind. That is the hardest case. Of course, a person comes in with so many problems. That's very difficult. And you can't tackle them all at once. You have to tackle according to priority, one thing at a time. However, or maybe one or two goals, right, at most. But if a person is not motivated to change, for whatever reason is, then the time gets wasted, and there's such a, it feels like a tug of war, between client and coach. That's really counterproductive. So it's important to know the theories so that you know how to motivate your client, and where this person is coming from, why is it not working for you, and it can be really helpful. So often the clients look for a coach and hope for an anticipation of a change in their lives, whether it be problem solved, growth, or moving toward a goal or direction. In order to change, the clients themselves need to be motivated. And unmotivated clients, even though they are the ones who sought coaching in the first place, will not meet the goals and will remain unsatisfied. Then eventually they might blame it on you, like, you're not a good coach, like I didn't achieve my goal, when it was in the first place their motivational issue. So it'd be helpful if you talk about motivation, discuss motivation with your clients. It is worthwhile to explore some of the key motivational theories before you delve deeper into learning about coaching. So some of you are working in the business world or have done business in the past, and so the theories that we're going to talk about will be illustrated, they'll be explained in a business context, but these theories are applicable at home, in your workplace, or any other context as well. So the first theory is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you probably heard of this if you've taken Introduction to Psychology or Sociology, some kind of education course. You probably recognize this. So at the bottom is physiological needs. The physiological needs is, shelter, clothes, food. There are things that we must have. Otherwise, you can't move to the next level. You can't, until that need is met, you will not be able to do too much of other things. And of course, in a war situation or some other kind of situations, but it's temporary, right? People, their physiological needs are not met. Still, they can do other things. However, their biggest focus and attention will be on physiological needs until they are met. So if your employees are not met with basic needs, you won't have you won't see other goals being met, at least within your expected time frame, because their basic needs are still demanding. they're there. You need to meet their basic needs. This is, do they have adequate like office? Do they have a space or a desk, right? Do they are they given break times, paid vacation, sick leave, or are they given adequate? Well, is it too cold? Is it too warm? Is that do they get paid justly, right? Is it too long of hours? Or so nowadays the companies are providing a lot. They're trying to meet the basic needs, right? And there are even labor laws in order to protect the basic human rights, right? Yeah. So, well, if you're not given a chance to go to the bathroom, right? And say, and other needs, you until that is taken care of, like you won't see them working diligently. At least in the long term, it's going to be a minus. And then safety needs. Some of the people that I know are working in a dangerous area, like high crime areas, and you have to have a security guard. You have to have the security system. If your employees are not feeling physically safe, you're gonna get very few applicants in the beginning, and it'll be more difficult for your organization to get like quality people to work for you. And then love and belonging needs. Even in a professional setting, there has to be some kind of warmth to some degree. And then instead of, oh, you know what, you just come into your office and then just spend 8 hours and then go back home and that's it. Rather than that, there is a belonging need, and that's another reason is how the individual perceives the relationship between their performance and a given outcome. So, given outcome. So then performance is higher, and therefore the outcome is, they're going to have 5 outcomes. Now, valence is how the individual values a particular outcome or reward. So, like if I perform like this, I get 5 of these. But I value this, 5, that's enough. Or if it's something really important, then even 1, I, will value. Even if I get 1, because it's so important, it's meaningful, so that therefore I don't mind getting even 1, right? Versus if it's not meaningful to you, then they might give you a lot, but it's like, well, okay, I'll increase my performance to some degree, but it's not really rewarding to me. And then quantitative measurement is on a scale of 0 to 1. So this could be 0.25, this could be 0.8, this could be 0.63, things like that. Now, if there's a very positive relationship between the effort and performance, so if I put in my effort, then the performance is definitely up. Say, there's a high correlation. So the ratio is that my effort and performance, the relationship is 0.8. Oh, I'm gonna put in effort because that's pretty good. Versus 0.25, like no matter how much effort I put in, the performance and the reward not gonna be very good. Then, definitely you're gonna put in not put in too much effort because they're not really strongly correlated. Say an example might be an organization that's highly political. When I say political, I'm not talking about like different ideologies, but rather there's so much politics going on in the company that even if you put in a lot of effort and your performance is pretty good, depending on the person, if your boss likes that person versus does not like this person, no matter how much I try, you're not going to get acknowledged, you're not going to get the reward, then you're not motivated to put in that effort, right? Versus if the supervisor is fair, this person acknowledges the effort and performance, then and then there's a reward. We're not talking about just monetary reward, but it could be verbal praise, it could be some kind of certificate, it can be paid leave, it could be promotion, it could take any kind of form, right? It could take any kind of form or giving you an opportunity to grow and develop and things like that, right? It can be any form of reward, but then if the supervisor actually acknowledges fairly the performance, it's kind of hard to be fair. We're all emotional beings, right? But then as a supervisor, people really need to try to be fair and try to be self-aware. Do I favor this person too much, and see whatever this person does as right and meaningful and good, versus this person makes a lot of effort, but I somehow don't click with this person, and therefore this person, whatever he or she does, I'm not gonna say good things about him. Adams' equity. Equity is another theory, right? So Adams' equity came out in 1963 by a psychologist called John Stacy Adams. And employees' motivation is based on how they view their workplace rewards in comparison to other employees' rewards. So equity is how fairly you perceive you're treated at work. It measures the ratio of inputs and outputs. And inequity is when the subject perceives the ratios as unequal. The subject's inputs at her job are 45-hour work week and being on call 3 nights per week. She has been with the company for 10 years. Her outputs are $85,000 and 20 paid vacation days and retirement paid benefits. The referent is a peer who works in the same department. His inputs are 40 hours work week. He shows great enthusiasm for his job, and he has been with the company for 5 years. His outputs are $85,000 salary, 20 paid vacation days per year, and retirement benefits. Of course, the subject's inputs are far greater than the reference. So, but the outputs are the same. So this means that one person is working 45 hours a week, right, and has been there for 10 years, and getting the same, outputs and benefits, right? So this means that the subject's input to output ratio is greater, and she's under rewarded, and the referent is over rewarded because he's been there only for 5 years and he puts in only 40 days, but perhaps maybe it could be a gender difference. It could be that he's receiving favor from his supervisor. There's inequity. So eventually, over time, this is going to create something, unless the subject has another reason to stay there. She's likely to move to a different job, right? So a fair workplace environment, you need to make sure that the individual values the outcome, and the employees' opinions are considered. Like you need to hear out. There could be complaining and whining without good reasons, and there are people who are just they have a tendency to be negative and just go and run on and on, and they themselves are being unfair, right? And it could be those employees too. But then most of the time, you need to really listen carefully and try to see if there is a truth in what they say. And then if you value that employee, try to keep them, right? Not by just trying to just do whatever strange in order to please that person, but rather listen to what the person says, and if you need to fix something, if you need to change something, then you need to do that to provide equity, right? Consistent decisions and being open to corrections. So supervisors need to be humble, they need to be open to corrections. And this could be really hard for those people who were brought up in hierarchical authoritarian environment, and if you yeah, it has to do with your self-view too. Those people who are relatively self-confident will be open to corrections, right? And treat all people with respect and dignity. And when you correct anybody, then you need to kind of sandwich it, right? Between positive, but then there should be a meat. And treat all people with respect and dignity. If you don't treat them with dignity, it shows. Even if you use mild language, language is very important, because if you say things in a manner that is easier to hear, then it's going to be well communicated versus but still over time people realize you can't hide it. Over time people know if they're respected, if they're treated with dignity, or you're just saying it but then you're mistreating them, or you're making it look better than it is. It's not gonna work. Over time people realize, and the opposite would be true too. If there's a person who is not eloquent enough to make it sound good, this person's intention is really good but perhaps misunderstood or not go unnoticed, but then over time it will be revealed and people will start talking about, that person, you think, say your supervisor, he doesn't talk much and he doesn't seem to recognize what you did well, but then in the end he really rewards you, like he really he doesn't forget the good things that you've done, and so don't worry about it. Like there's a repetition that you get to build. So key takeaways from these series. We're going to talk more about other theories later, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So what are the key takeaways? Is rely on the employee's perception. So the reality is closely connected to the perception. So however you perceive the reality to be, that is the person's reality, right? And then you need to kind of hear out. And then you need to carefully discern if it's fair, if it's reasonable. Require a manager to recognize individual differences. You need to be fair, but you don't treat people in a uniform manner, because each individual is different. So try to allow that room. Now, when a job aligns with the person's individual needs, so make it rewarding for this person, then they are motivated to maximize their output. Yeah, if the rewards are important, they're gonna work hard at it, right? Allowing employees to participate in decisions that affect them. Yeah, and allowing employees to participate in decisions that affect them. So you know, of course, there are certain company policies that everyone has to adhere to, but then if the decisions are made solely by one individual or those like core people and it affects everyone, there will be a sense of unfairness that they feel, and in the end, it can be a source of conflict. And employees should perceive that they are rewarded fairly. Yeah, so the perception is important as well. And motivation and coaching. So how do you motivate as a coach? Be positive. Positivism is really important. You want to work with somebody who's positive. The circumstances might not always be positive. You know, there are always issues and problems, but then if you're positive and if you're optimistic and if you're solid with your vision, people will be attracted to you. Be specific. Like it's not having details and not having the big picture. No, you need to have a big picture. However, you need to be clear. And when you communicate, try to communicate clearly by being specific as well, because you know, some people use a lot of euphemism. It can be helpful, but there's a time and place for that. But there are times when people use euphemism, you're like, different people interpret it differently, and they're like, what is he trying to say? Like, what is the main message? Like, what is the, like, how am I supposed to respond to that? So try to be specific and be certain. Like, oh, I'm not quite sure which direction we're going, but, you know, somehow just stick it out, you know, that's not gonna work. So plan A, plan B, plan C, this is where we're going. Be consistent. So it's important to communicate and try to hear the other person out in order to see the difference or similarities in expectations. And then set the standard for both of you and try to be consistent over time. If the consistent rule or whatever that you said is in the end, oh, it's not working or it's not fair, then you might have to modify. But then even with the change, you need to go consistent and be immediate. You know, if there's any potential problem that you see, then you need to kind of provide immediate feedback. Adult and child alike, you know, they need to, otherwise, you know, it can get forgotten and it's like, oh really, did I say that? Oh, did I do that? No, I didn't realize. So coaching should be immediate. And sometimes, you know, the situation, you know, because you might be meeting only once a week or maybe every other week, and something happened and you can't take an immediate action. But then the moment you are able to make comments or give an opportunity to process that, then try to do it immediately as possible. Yeah, so then what drives behavior is there's a situation, and then whatever you choose, you know, in anticipation of something, and your anticipation can be wrong, you know, but you choose behavior A or you choose behavior B, and then there's a consequence. And if your consequence is something that you don't like, then you're likely to change. Or if you think that the other consequence might be better, then you might switch, right? So whatever the consequence that you get, that is likely to drive your behavior. Either stick to it or change, right? And so the explanation is on the next page. We enter a situation and then we anticipate the outcome we want from that situation. So I'm going to aim for that, but then it could be totally wrong too. It's sometimes trial by error, or experienced people can share their wisdom and their experience, and this is what happened. I thought I was going to get consequence A by taking action of A, but you know what? That was not the case. There was hardly any correlation. And if you actually take the action B, you're more likely to get A, which is what you want. So we choose the behavior that gives us that outcome, right? Finding what motivates the other person. Yeah, everyone is motivated to do something. You cannot motivate someone else to work harder, but you can find what is important to them and then find ways to make sure they get more of that as a reward for high level performance. Yeah, so then what's important to them? If family time is important to them, then try to give them that reward when the performance goes up, right? If promotion is important, then present that as a possibility, and then there could be other rewards too, like raising salary is a common thing, or opportunity for growth and development, and then connection with other people. There could be many different kinds of things that motivate. So each person is different, and you need to kind of find out by talking with them. So what's important to them? What is their personal life like? Of course, you can't find out details about what their personal life is, but if you can find out something. And then the DISC behavior style. DISC, I think we are going to talk about at a different section, in a different chapter 4. So I'm not going to talk about it in detail right now. So basically, DISC stands for dominant and inspiring, supportive, and cautious. Well, let's talk about a little bit about that. So dominant, dominant people, they're motivated by solving problems and conquering challenging situations and getting results. Yeah, get the results. These are the people who are leadership style. And then inspiring people are motivated by the opportunity to interact with other people, public recognition, and varied activities. So I can do diverse things. Like I don't have to be stuck with this one thing, but I can engage with others. It could be a combination. Like you might not be just one, but you might be a combination of different things. And then supportive people are motivated by teamwork, the opportunity to help other people, and feeling appreciated for their contribution. And then cautious people are motivated by structuring or organizing things, and researching or searching for information, and finding the right solution for a problem. Yeah. Yeah. So and then so this behavior, there's a whole questionnaire by which you can actually recognize. So know your employee's style and the tasks they like to do at work. What kind of tasks do you like? What are your giftings? Some people enjoy woodworking, writing, building websites, working on their house, landscaping, and cooking. There could be like different things. And these people are motivated by analyzing, and some people are motivated by analyzing and solving problems. So if you give them those kinds of tasks, then they will like it. But another person, we just talked about DISC. If you are a supportive kind of person, you might want to experience a good teamwork, and you might want to, give verbal praise and just recognition that their contribution is appreciated and things like that. So depending on what your style is, different things will be rewarding. So give these people assignments that maximize their ability to analyze and solve problems. Versus if your style is, say, inspiring, then inspiring people are motivated by the opportunity to interact with other people, public recognition and varied activities. So make the activities kind of interesting. Like you can't always create activities, but then try to make this work an interesting activity for them. Yeah. Yeah. So then how do you motivate your client? Within your, I guess coaches have limitations because they're not like supervisors, right? But then there are still some of the rewards that can actually, you don't have to create a reward and actually hand it over to them, but they may see, like as a result of my effort of changing, these rewards that I want is going to be given. If they see that connection, then they're likely to make that change. Yeah, so having said that, let's go back and talk a little more about chapter 5. We talked about the fact that Moses went back and this is what God said, and he showed the signs, right? So the Israelites actually believed that Moses was sent by God. And now, afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." They're going to enter into the wilderness. Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifice to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." So but the king of Egypt said, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor?" So these are my slaves. Why are you trying to escape, right? Get back to your work. Then Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you're stopping them from working." That same day, Pharaoh gave order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people, "You're no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks." So in the ancient past, that you had to put the mud, mix it with the straws in order to make a brick, right? But then now no more straws. Let them go and gather their own straw. So the work became even harder, right? But require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They're lazy. That is why they're crying out, "Let us go and sacrifice to our God." Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. Then the slave drivers and the overseers went out and said to the people, "This is what Pharaoh says. I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all." So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, "Complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw." And Pharaoh's slave drivers beat the Israelites overseas they had appointed, demanding, Why haven't you met your quota of bricks yesterday, or today and before? Then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh. Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we're told, make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people. Pharaoh said, lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. So the petition did not work, right? The Israelite overseers realized that they were in trouble when they were told, you're not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them, and they said,